And since then,
okay,
some of his peers.
Now, I'm familiar with Robert Gallo, but let me ask you this right off. We understand how they played this whole thing into the gay community first. What we would like to know, because we have a predominantly minority base all over the world, radio listenership, how did this thing filter into a minority pandemic, as they call it?
Yeah, what happened was, and this is fascinating, what happened was they needed to broaden the risk categories, the risk groups. So really it's become a house of numbers, which is the documentary that will really shed some more light on this. A house of numbers. You can find it streaming on the internet, find it on YouTube and whatnot. But what they do is, when you get tested for the supposed HIV virus, which we know is not what they're testing for, but that aside, without having to reiterate that, they ask you a series of questions. So let me ask you the questions here. Okay, you ready?
Okay, go ahead.
Have you been to Africa in the last 10 years?
Yes.
You have. Okay. Are you a gay male? Have you been involved with any gay relations?
No.
Okay. What race are you? Are you black?
I'm black.
Okay, you're black. All right. That's going to make a couple points in the other direction for you. And let's see here. There's a few other things, and I'll just assume your answer is no for these other things. All right, now let me do my test, all right? I've never been to Africa, and I'm not black. Everything else, like you, everything else, I don't do intravenous drugs. I don't shoot up heroin. I've never been in a gay relationship, so on and so forth, okay? Now, we both are tested, and we get our results back. Our results are identical. In other words, the same count of antibodies in your blood versus my blood comes back. But guess what?
Okay. What?
Your blood, because of you answering that you've been to Africa and that you're black, your blood is considered to be HIV positive, and your test, even though it's exactly the same, is considered to tell them that you have months to live and that you're about to die and that you need to dose yourself with AZT, a reject chemotherapy drug, so on and so forth. But guess what?
Well,
okay.
Well, that's interesting. Oh, hold up, though. But what is your test results? I mean, you have the same test results. What do you come back as?
I come back as fine.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. If there's someone listening now that have had that diagnosis of HIV somewhere in our listenership or out there in the world who's a minority, what would you tell them today?
First thing I would tell them is to deal with their underlying health issues, to make sure that they are eating well, so on and so forth, and to be careful with the medications that they've been told that they're going to take. I would tell them, you know what, here's what I would tell them. I would say, take a deep breath. I'm about to tell you something that you've been looking for. You're not sick like they're telling you. You don't have this death sentence. You don't need to be doped up on medication. You might have some health issues. You might have to detox off of some of the dangers that you've already occurred. But you're fine. It's a fraud, okay? They lied to you from the get-go.
Okay, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this question real quick. I mean, I'm just flowing with them if you don't mind, because I think you have stunted some interest as far as these questions go. Because I've seen people that I've grew up around. You know, matter of fact, I came up around a time right after, a little later. I was a kid at that time when the so-called HIV diagnosis of Magic Johnson. Before that, there was no threat of HIV or AIDS anywhere in our neighborhoods at all.
Magic Johnson was the figurehead for all that. And guess what? He didn't take the medication. He didn't take it. He's a fraud. Magic Johnson is a liar.
Well, that's what I wanted to say, because I know people who've had diagnosis who didn't go to any doctor, and they have been fine all the way up until this time. But on the other hand, because of the diagnosis, they are afraid to reprocreate, or they've been demonized to the point where they can't deal with another person because they're psychologically damaged by the diagnosis itself. They didn't take any medicine. They're healthy. They're growing. They're looking just like Magic Johnson. But it's
Magic
psychological.
Magic Johnson gained 20 pounds and played for the Dream Team, supposedly on AZT. It doesn't work. He was not on AZT.
So again, let me ask you this then. If someone had a cold like you do right now, or have a flu, and was to go into a doctor's office and take an HIV test, and they're black and whatever the case is there a possibility or a great possibility that they might come back HIV positive, and if so, why?
Well, there's a greater possibility that they might come back HIV positive. One, because they fit a certain risk group. Two, because they're, from being sick, having a cold like I do, they're being told that, your antibodies are elevated. Pregnant women, when women are pregnant, and I had to go through this recently, myself and my wife had our first child, and we wanted to do a home birth, but ended up in the hospital. Long story short, through my research, I know for a fact that pregnant women, when they are pregnant, their bodies are naturally elevated in their antibodies. It's just it's a matter of, and this is what I'm saying about health. You don't need to be a doctor to understand this. You don't.
Okay. Now that we're here, let me ask you this. I'm gonna hit you with another one here. All right. So you were mentioning earlier that they have targeted a certain group, and I know that God, you want to hit this because over in Manchester, where he is, that's the highest rate of so-called HIV in the whole country, and it's no coincidence. Like I spoke to you earlier, that it's because of minorities. Jamaicans primarily live in that area. Let me ask you this. You were talking about AZT, which is a drug they normally give you if you diagnose with HIV. And really, HIV is more so, if it's a diagnosis at all, it's usually through some type of vitamin deficiency opposed to you being ill. Okay? And so I wanted to ask you this. AZT, the drug, what exactly does that do? What do they say it does to help you with HIV?
Well, in order to understand what their position is, and from what I understand, to be fair, I think that they've started to get away from using AZT. So there's all sorts of other medicines perhaps out now that are more contemporary that I don't know as much about, including Truvada, which is a pill that they want you to take preemptively, without any diagnosis whatsoever. They want people to take medicine now to help prevent the possibility that you might get this boogeyman of the virus. But AZT, which a lot of people early on were poisoned with, is a reject chemotherapy drug. So it was once used as a chemotherapy, and I hate calling it chemotherapy because it's chemo poison. That's a whole different show.
Yeah, that's horrible.
And what it does, and this is even crazier, is it destroys your DNA. It's a DNA destroyer. The side effects, are just the same side effects as the supposed HIV virus.
You know what?
Yes,
I'm hearing you, man, and I'm itching to come in. You understand me? There's so many things I want to ask. You understand me? I'm getting messages here on my Skype. People asking questions here, saying to me, I got one message that just came in says I'm confused. Is he saying there's no such thing as HIV? No.
It's never been isolated.
It's never been. Okay then. No. When you say it's never been isolated, you mean that the virus has never been isolated, right?
Yeah. Show me the money, show me the HIV, show it to me.
Right. Okay then. So, what you're saying then? Okay then. If two black guys for conversation, right? went into a so-called clinic, and both of them was diagnosed with HIV, and one decided not to take the medicine, and one did. What are you saying? The one that didn't take the medicine can go on and live a normal life without nobody being none the wiser?
Well, they could go on to live a more normal life. I believe that they may have some underlying illness besides HIV that would create their body's immune system to trigger the antibodies that you found in the test. So they're better off because they're not told that they have a death sentence. They're better off because they're then not subsequently poisoned on deadly pharmaceuticals like AZT. So
I'm saying, from what I'm getting here, you're saying that, listen, once they do this test and they find that the antibodies in your system, that they automatically say, okay, this is HIV and we need to give you this AZT medicine to prevent you from dying. So really, it's just maybe you have a common cold, maybe I have a cold, or maybe I'm a bit run down for working for 4 or 5 days without no sleep. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. Let me tell you about this little pick-me, Lindsay Nagel, okay? Okay, she was 1 year old when she was adopted.
Okay.
By parents in the States. And they took this youth to the States, and they got her tested as she was immigrating here from Romania, where she was adopted.
Okay.
They were told that she will have only a few years to live, and that she needed to go on the medicine right away. So they put her on the medicine. At the time it was AZT, and she started to decline in health rapidly. Until one year, her parents realized that a lot of her problems were related to the side effects of this medicine, and they contacted a gentleman by the name of Dr. Peter Duesberg, who is one of the leading virologists at the University of Berkeley. And what they found out from him is very similar to what I'm sharing with you today, that there is no real found evidence that this HIV retroactive virus is creating the havoc that your child, your young daughter, and the reality of the situation is that you need to get her off of the medicine right away. Now, here's what happened. They got her off of the medicine right away. Her health started to improve dramatically. All of the other children, all of them pick me, okay? And I apologize for using patois, but Jamaican culture is near and dear to my heart, and I know a lot of your listeners out there speak a bit of patois. So I'm not trying to be just faking here. I come from South Florida. I grew up in Miami, and I was raised by a Jamaican lady, and I think that conscious music, conscious individuals like yourself get this. So that aside, I digress. What I was about to say is that every other child in her hospital, okay, who was diagnosed at the same time with HIV, that stayed on the medicine, that stayed on the traditional path of treatment, they all died. She not only improved dramatically, she's still alive today. She's now 21 years old and in perfect health.
Wow. Check that.
Man, that's hey, Gocc, I want to say this is profound. I mean, the thing that blew me away that I hardly could not contain myself earlier when he mentioned, I don't know if people are just coming on, but he mentioned early that him being a Caucasian male, if he was to go into the same clinic that you and I go into and have the same results, he would be diagnosed. They would actually treat if he's sick, illness, if you have a cold or a flu or whatever the case is, with the same test, he would be perfectly fine. But myself would have a death sentence. They would call me in with my family and tell me that I'm HIV positive and that I only have a certain amount of time to live. You understand?
And to take that a step further, it not only differs based on who you are as a person, it not only differs based on what race you are, but it also differs based on where you are tested, so what location. So people in Manchester could be tested with a certain level of results that are identical to me being tested here in Florida in the United States,